interest. The gentleman from New York, Mr. LaLota, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Austin, in your opening statement, you referenced several DoD initiatives good for the quality of life of our troops, including access to child care, more affordable products to commissary, and better base housing. And these are commendable advances, and I know our troops appreciate them. As you know, Mr. Secretary, another way we take care of our troops overseas is by having proper and enforceable status of forces agreements with our allies. And these compacts guarantee our service members certain rights when they're overseas, including rights Americans are generally comfortable with when they're under arrest by a government. Can you tell us, Mr. Secretary, how important you think status of forces agreements are, both with respect to troop welfare and mission accomplishment?
I think they're really important.
Want to go into a little more depth, Mr. Secretary?
Yeah, it's very difficult for us to operate in an area where we don't have the ability to protect our troops, and so it's important that we do everything we can to go after the right measures to ensure those protections.
In the United States, if a citizen is arrested, they're afforded basic rights, like a right to a lawyer if they request one. Mr. Secretary, do you think that our troops overseas, if they're arrested by a friendly foreign nation, should also be afforded to the right to attorney before being questioned?
Yeah, and I think those things ought to be addressed as we work out those visiting forces agreements. But yes, I always want to make sure that our troops have access to legal counsel.
In a friendly foreign nation, when a U.S. service member's liberty is at risk, and when that friendly foreign nation doesn't have English as their primary language, do you think our troops should be afforded to the right to a translator, Mr. Secretary?
I do, but again, if there are specific cases that you're talking about, we probably ought to talk about what those specifics are.
Are you familiar with the case of Lieutenant Ridge Alconis, Mr. Secretary?
I am.
Would you mind telling me a little bit about it?
Yeah, he was charged with the killing of a couple of Japanese citizens as a result of an automobile accident.
Right. No drugs or alcohol were involved. He was
That's correct.
on a Liberty weekend coming back from Mount Fuji, I understand, innocently fell asleep at the wheel, which resulted in the death of 2 Japanese nationals. He admitted to guilt. He was of the understanding that if he admitted to that guilt and if he paid a restitution of about $1.5 million, half came from insurance, half came from his own personal funds, that he was led to believe that his liberty would no longer be at risk. Currently, he's serving 3 years into a sentence in a Japanese jail with subhuman standards, Mr. Secretary. Notwithstanding that, the committee does understand that our relationship with Japan is critical to our strategic interests in the region. We know that the most dangerous conflict, if it comes, will be one with China and possibly with North Korea, and we understand and value that relationship. But the unjust imprisonment of Lieutenant Alconis has begun to erode that relationship, and looking how harsh our ally has treated the lieutenant, including being confined without any real basic rights that might be afforded to a U.S. prisoner, it's starting to erode that relationship and having a chilling effect on our troops. Mr. Secretary, a prisoner transfer request under the Council of Europe Treaty has been submitted to resolve this issue and to bring Lieutenant Alconis home. The President, the Vice President, and the National Security Advisor have all personally pledged not only for the prisoner transfer request, but also to the Alconis family. Is your department doing anything to execute the Commander-in-Chief's intention to bring the lieutenant home?
We continue to work with the interagency to provide support wherever we can. So.
Great. And my time is almost up, Mr. Secretary, so I want to leave you with 2 things. I hope that the department continues to use all the tools at its disposal to bring the lieutenant home, but going forward that we negotiate proper and enforceable status of forces agreements that give our forces overseas the basic civil rights that are afforded to most Americans. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.